That whole furore with campaign brief stating that all of the top creative directors were in fact blokes just made me go, oh my God, it really hasn't changed. Are you kidding me? It hasn't changed.
Welcome to Actual People, a podcast hosted by me, Chauncey Zulkin, dedicated to meaningful conversations about the evolving landscape of our lives and the power of our own creativity and imagination to make magic. Jill Brinsdon is a creative director living in New Zealand. She caught my attention when Cindy Gallop, the ultimate feminist icon of women working in the creative industries, shared a post that she made. In the post, she talks about being featured in an article in her 30s when she was a creative director at an agency, and they referred to her as battling her way to the top. And honestly, I would have not even really noticed it and said, great, I got recognition, feels good, and I would have called it a day. But she saw what I did not, which was this, and this is a quote from her post. I was in my 30s, there was no battle, I was the best for the job. She called them on their bullshit and made them change it. She goes on to say it was just one incident after another, groping, minimizing, commenting inappropriately about her postpartum body, expecting that postpartum body to shrug off the baby and get back to work. So she started her own branding agency in her 30s and she just got on with it. I could be talking about myself. This felt so familiar. She remarked at the end of her post that she thought she was going to be the last generation fighting for pay equity, idea equality, body sovereignty, and a level playing field. And then she goes on to say, the fact that nuanced, exclusionary, microaggressive discrimination persists is criminal. I knew I was going to like Jill, and I knew she was wildly intelligent, and I had to have her on. So let's hear her story.
I've just listened to your trip to New Zealand.
Oh, you did?
You were in my neighborhood. I shifted to Arrowtown 2 years ago.
Oh my God, that's so amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to you saying we rented e-bikes. I bet you just about went past my cottage.
Yeah, I'm kind of now enthralled with that whole part of the world. I'd never been to that hemisphere.
And what made you choose it?
There was a woman, we were colleagues at an ad agency, actually.
Yeah.
Where we both committed this horrible crime of being female at work, you see.
I know that crime.
There was another woman who also committed this crime, and the three of us were all laid off in the department, and the 20-something guys remained. We were all let go, one after the other, just the women.
Wow.
Yeah, we bonded over that.
That one.
She was always really supportive of me. We had a male boss who really bullied me, who I actually liked in a lot of ways. She was always like, he's mean to you. And I'm like, I know, he was really mean. He was really a bully, but we were just so used to it.
God. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? You know what's been so interesting? I did that post and it just took off and went super viral. And then at the same time, I'm getting lots and lots of feedback from women. And I realized that what they were really responding to so powerfully was that I stood up to it, that I hit back. All the way through, I hit back.
Talk about that post, and I want to hear what the response was.
I've been posting just quietly every week and telling a kind of story, something that happened in my career, either recently or a long time ago. I had a post ready to go, but the whole thing was blowing up with the industry publication in Australia, Campaign Brief. Like all of those industry publications, a lot of the agencies pay money to be involved. It's very symbiotic. It's also very, back scratching. And every so often they bring out top 20X, top 20Y. What's the best ad of the century? Who are the best creative directors? It was like the top 20 creative directors, and one of them was female, and 19 of them were the lads. And there was no conversation around it. It was just, this is the way it is.
Isn't that interesting? There's so few female talented people out there. That's what that must mean, right?
That's what they were saying, to be honest. I think a huge number of these people just live in their own echo chambers and listen to each other. And women continue to be probably a little bit annoying around the edges. And what's great is that it became a catalyst for a very strong conversation that women and men took part in, which basically said, come on, this is ridiculous. It's time for it to stop. It's time for us to look and act like we're a modern industry with modern sensibilities that is interested in equality and diversity. And that conversation was being absolutely thrashed. Everybody was up in arms. There were a lot of really interesting, thoughtful comments from women in particular, and from a number of men that were very supportive. So I had a post ready to go. And weirdly, I had touched on the fact that it didn't seem that the advertising industry had changed that much. Now, that whole furore with campaign brief stating that all of the top creative directors were in fact blokes just made me go, oh my God, it really hasn't changed. Are you kidding me? It hasn't changed. So Saturday morning, between you and I wasn't furious about that at that exact time. I was furious with my Latino boyfriend for being a dick the night before. So I was sitting up in bed beside him. He was asleep. He's oblivious and asleep. And I just smashed out this post and I wrote it. I think I wrote it in 45 minutes flat. I could have come up with 50 scenarios to demonstrate what my career path was like. I just came up with four. They fell out very easily. Then I kind of made a call to arms basically and said it's really not good enough. And the thing is, there's, these kinds of situations, they're so layered. They're so complex and layered, and it suits patriarchal systems for them to remain complex and layered, because on every level, you can't say this is because of that. This is because of that. Because if we could pinpoint that singular thing that was that, we could fix it. But what I absolutely said in my post was that nothing will change if men don't join the conversation and agree that things have to change. I did say there were plenty of great men in advertising, and I worked with a number of brilliant men, lots more brilliant men than brilliant women because of the time that I was in advertising, and was supported by many of them, not all, fair to say, but was well supported by a number of them. But as long as men continue to just box on and go, oh, look at all those creative directors, that's great, say nothing, remain mute, the problem continues. So it's the absolute muteness of the silence that rains down upon things that will allow the system to perpetuate, and it will perpetuate in perpetuity.
You can't silo women and have women just talking about this.
It can't just be women that go, that's not fair, because actually life isn't fair from the moment we're in the play park. It's not fair. You can see the dynamic at play between boys and girls, between strong girls and shyer girls, between timid lads who might grow up to be nerds and in fact inherit the earth, versus, the jocks. You can almost see in the play park the kids that are going to be the jocks. It's not fair. And so to me, there's no great victory in saying that's not fair. You actually have to get under the bonnet. You have to look at what's going on, and you have to make it a whole conversation, which involves men, women, and others. It has to involve all of us.
What do you think is wrong? You said it's a complex mix of different things, which also kind of obscures the validity of it, because you can't pinpoint one thing that one person did. It doesn't have to be this egregious thing. I almost thought that you were saying it was accumulative. So what do you think is really going on that it never seems to get better?
I mean, what was interesting about my post as well is that it was clearly within the industry of advertising. But I can't tell you the number of women who messaged me and said, it's the same in engineering, it's the same in IT, it's the same in this, it's the same in that. Unless they're actually female-led industries, the patriarchal systems are at play. They've been there for a very long time, and they're not really going to be undone.
Yeah. So what are some of the people that responded to your post saying to you? I reached out to you because you weren't trying to impress people, where sometimes on LinkedIn you feel like people are writing things made to make themselves look good. So you neither seemed like you felt sorry for yourself or like you were being self-aggrandizing, but you were just being really honest. And people don't seem to do that enough.
No, they really don't. No, all of the social media platforms, they want us to put our best foot forward, the shiniest version of ourselves. But, the truth is that my advertising career was a very successful one. And actually, I always pushed back. And when I did get a lot of the messages from women, they basically said, thank you. I've never been able to push back. Too many times I've been taken to my knees by behavior of men in the main.
How
And
did you, how do you think you survived it? Because I've been pushed out of
yeah,
agencies for being outspoken.
it's interesting the way things happen in little sets, in our lives. Like you were saying, you went to New Zealand and you get these, then suddenly you have all these different thoughts and they all join together and you're like, oh, wow, okay. Now, there's been a real epiphany for me in some ways since that post. I've been going to the British and Irish Film Festival, and I love film festivals. I kind of completely camp out. And there's a real wave of female stories going on at the moment. And two of the films that I saw, in fact, one of them wasn't in the festival. One of them was Madame Clicquot, about Widow Clicquot's whole true story with the Veuve Clicquot brand. And that was a remarkable story just about a woman in the late 19th century who had to push through, and everyone thought she was mad, and because she was strong and she was clever and she had clarity around what her pursuit was, but the fight was unbelievable. The other film which completely stopped me in my tracks was about Lee Miller, who was a fashion model and then became a war photographer. Remarkable war photographer, was right there when the gates opened of Auschwitz, when the war finished. Like, some of the most remarkable imagery from wartime, from that war in particular, was Lee Miller. And in the film, Lee Miller said, I was born determined. And that was my lucky streak. And I thought, shit, that's what I had. I was a little girl brought up in the bottom of the South Island. And I say that I was pretty much brought up in a poverty of expectation. The only expectation that I really ever had was to get out of the house and get myself to school. And I made my own school lunch. I just had to get on. But right from word go, I just had this, I just had this little redhead drive in me. I never understood, right from the beginning, I never understood why women thought their wedding day should be the best day of their lives, but men put a ball and chain around their ankle. I'm like, how does this work? Sorry, how is it her best day and his worst day? I don't understand that. I didn't understand beauty pageants. I didn't understand so many of the things that little girls were supposed to absolutely aspire to. And I also absolutely knew that I was going to have a career. It was always going to be about a career for me. So I just kind of got on with it, really. And I think there was a point in my career when, I think I'm going down a rabbit hole here. Tell me if I am.
No, I like this.
Point in my career, I was at one of the big agencies. And if I'm completely honest, I wasn't getting a lot of traction. And also, I don't think I was very good at my job at that point. Something hadn't quite clicked with me. What I wasn't doing was what the boys were doing. And at that time I was like, oh, this is so boring. Why do I have to do this? They would pre-sell their ideas down the hallways. They would, meet at 6:30 at the bar when I was heading home and talk about the campaigns they'd been working on. Everything was a campaign about the campaign, or a campaign about the idea that they wanted sold. And it was a hugely competitive time. I was a copywriter at that point, and we were all competing for every single idea. We had to go into a room. It was like the Colosseum, and I was buckling. I wasn't very good at it. But part of it, if I'm completely honest, part of it was because I didn't think it was fair. And anyway, cut to the next agency. And it dawned on me that the thing that was in common with all of my experiences as I was boxing on to try and be a brilliant creative in advertising, the commonality was in fact me. I was a part of what was going on here. And that in fact, if I wanted to be in this particular Colosseum, playing with the lions, I needed to study the game a little more, or get out of the Colosseum, or get out of the ring. Get out of the ring or figure out how to play. So what I did was I looked at what the rules of the game were. I looked at my own integrity and my authenticity. I knew that I couldn't be anything but me. That's my USP. I'm a special gal. I've got some charisma. I've got some energy. I have a sense of humor. I needed to hold on to who I was, but I also needed to much, much better play the game. And I did. I doubled down. I pre-sold ideas. I had pre-meetings where I brought people in on early stages of the ideas so they had more involvement in those ideas. When I say people, 9 times out of 10, I'm talking about dudes. Guess what happened? They became more involved in the success of my ideas because they had a little touch of it. There's a phenomena that probably still exists in advertising, which is those people who seem to always be in the room when the big idea happens so they can get their name on the certificate. I've worked with numerous men over the years where I'm like, I don't think they've actually had a single brilliant idea of their own, but they sure know how to position themselves in the room when the big idea is happening. So they are an award winner. I had to just release to the fact that some more people were going to be on the bus with me. That's fine, as long as I was still at the front of the bus, mostly driving the bus, then away we went. So I guess what I did was re-engineered my own approach to how it was going to be.
How did you not get your ideas stolen from you? That seems to happen a lot. People take credit for other people's ideas in the room.
By the time I was moving into that phase of my career, I was running a creative department.
Mm.
So I wasn't just one woman with her ideas trying to hustle them. I was running a department, and I had a department that were actually full of sort of almost non-advertising type people. I had people that were out of art school. I kind of had geniuses and misfits as opposed to the people that were in the room and wanted their name on the certificate. There was a sort of purity around the creativity we had anyway. And I really protected that. I was a precocious creative director. I was quite a young female creative director. I think one of the stories I told on the LinkedIn post was an article being written about me actually at this particular agency where I stepped up and finally got good at my job, about me battling my way to the top, tough. She's tough. And I thought, wow, I was like 32 years old. I was a young creative director and I was a female creative director. I was incredible for that industry, but that wasn't the storyline. The storyline was she must be a tough bitch. It's the 70s poster. She's aggressive, he's assertive. It was the 70s poster. And I just wasn't having it, really. I just wasn't going to have it.
I never was a pushover, but at the same time, those politics I wasn't really good at.
They're crippling, yeah. My instinct has always been to push back, and my instinct has always been to see what the learning is. My pivot into the agency I talked about, I went, you know what? I am the one that's got to shift. I'm the one that's got to change the way I'm playing this because I really enjoy the business. There was so much about that stage of my career, which was fantastic. It's like, oh my God, I'm getting incredibly well paid to essentially have ideas. And I also loved the business of business. So no surprise I've shifted on and moved into strategy and then into branding because it gets me closer to my leaders, my business leaders, and it gets me closer to the business because I want to be able to use my creativity to affect change at that strategic level. You were saying I got fired. So did I. One agency, I love this story actually. At one agency, the first year I was there, at the end of the first year, the general manager, who was an American male, who I absolutely loved, one of the best people I've ever worked with in advertising, him and I were pulled into the chief executive's office and given a $10,000 bonus for being great contributors to the agency. Cut to 12 months later, and I'm booming. Like the agency's going gangbusters. The GM and I had led a number of new business wins. My mana was quite big in the agency at that time, and we were flying. Like everyone was having a great time. I still had my misfits and creatively brilliant creative department, but we were playing it our way. So I get pulled back into the chief executive's office. And the year before I mentioned he'd given me $10,000 for being a great contributor to the agency. He gave me $100,000 to go away.
Why?
Because I had become essentially a little bit too strong in the agency. Put a different lens through this, and we could say I had become too important to the agency. My energy was too big. When I walked into the agency in the morning, which was a large open plan agency, he said, you can see people turning around because you've walked in the door. Again, if I put a different lens on that, that's called charisma. Anyway, I took my 100K.
Do you feel like they think that it was becoming more your brand, the agency?
Yeah, I think that I was leading the agency too much. That was making him distinctly uncomfortable.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. But here's the bit. The bit is I went dickhead. I didn't go, I need to change myself. I need to bring myself down a peg or two. There are three ways ahead when something like that happens to you. One is you can beat yourself up to the end of the day because what did you do to create that to happen? I didn't believe that I had much to do with it, to be honest. I believed it was his own insecurities
Yes,
and really
100%.
not dealing with the role that I had played in the blossoming of that agency, not dealing with it. And I do think if I was a dude, there would be no conversations around this. I'd get another 10 grand for being a good contributor. So one approach is to beat yourself up. The second approach is to beat up the agency and the patriarchal systems that this kind of decision supports. That's another approach. Beat up the agency, beat up the system that supports the agency to behave like this. The third approach is what a windfall, 100 grand. Thank God I can have summer with my kid. I can give myself some breathing space. I haven't had any for ages, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do next. This is great. That's the road I took.
That's
It's
how
gone
I
through.
am. I
Yeah.
would always get energy. I remember getting let go in my late 20s from something, and my boyfriend at the time was so devastated when I told him this. And he's like, "Why are you acting like that? You act like you won the lottery." I'm like, "I don't know. That's just how I am. I get to move on to something else." Anytime something didn't work out work-wise, of course, relationship-wise, I would fall apart. But with work, I'd always be somehow like, okay, and next. I
Well,
never got upset. I got a little
yeah,
insulted or maybe
yeah.
mad for a minute, but the overwhelming feeling was a rush of excitement.
In the last few weeks, it has dawned on me that an awful lot of how it's worked out for me is just literally the inherent nature of who I am, that I will not be the loser. I will not lose because even if you get lessons from it, that makes you someone who's stepped away from it better than you left it. And that's just inherently built into me. It's just there, you know. So yeah, I'm sure I'm skidding over the fact that no one likes to get booted out, even if it is with a decent sized check. Nobody wants that. I was having a great time, you know, it was working and then suddenly it wasn't working anymore. But we have to practice what the bright side is. We have to flip it on its underbelly and see what color the underbelly is. And then we have to polish that up and see what we can do with it. One of my sons was with me recently, actually, and they grew up in my agency that I started, Radiation, in 2000. And Cody, the young one, would be in there running around, and he roasted me, saying, "Oh, yeah, I remember the early radiation days. You'd be like, I'd be watching you working, and you'd be like, oh, is that a tall building burning down over there? Great. You guys can get really good at putting out fires. This is going to be a great experience for you. Now, what have we got going on over here? Oh, that campaign is not going through. What a great opportunity we have." Like, he was roasting me. But what I loved about the roast was that one, he nailed it, but two, I just spent all of my time looking for how we could leverage the situation we were in.
Anytime something like that happens, you get better. If you had stayed
Yeah,
in that role, no matter what, you
yeah.
would not have as much depth to your character.
No,
Every time
absolutely.
there's
Or my
adversity,
career.
that's how we grow. One equals the other. That's the math on it. So we did a part two and we kind of jumped all over the place, but there are a few key moments I wanted to share here. I loved her visual about all the changes in the ad industry that she feels she nearly missed. And at the same time, she has countless stories of challenges she faced and feels proud to have overcome. Take a listen.
I visualize me calmly walking along the street, and there's a war directly behind me, and there's missiles right behind my head, missing me by 2 inches. And there's quicksand, which I somehow just meander past. And I kind of look back on it now, and I did feel like I was wading through mud, pretty much, you know, like it was a little bit hard, harder than I felt like it needed to be. There is a performance in what that industry is. If I'm honest, there was aspects of the game I enjoyed. You had to get into the slipstream of it and swim better. I kind of got to the point in my advertising career where I thought, I'm not going to go much further with this job. So I started my first agency. I thought, right, the industry's falling apart. Brand is experiential, it's cultural. If the business can't actually deliver on the promise the advertising agency is making, then it's going to fail. And I'll get the blame. I'll get the blame because I'm in charge of putting the lipstick on the pig. You know, the lipstick wears off, the pig is still a pig, and everyone goes, fucking Jill Brinsdon, those guys fucked up, like, no, no, it was always a pig. You never gave me the chance. So with radiation, I loftily called it a brand navigation agency, which never took off. I was way too up in this clouds.
Yeah.
Wherever the brand needs to live, we will help it thrive. So it might need to live inside the hearts of the employees. It might need to live more thoroughly in the customer space. So wherever it needed to live. I started my business. I had a real clarity around the fact that I wanted to work only with emotionally and creatively generous people, and that included my clients. So no more creative departments, no more art director, writer. I didn't understand that anymore. I can't believe it still exists. I would have people who were brilliant at creative, concept development. Then I would bring designers in. I've always loved designers because they obsess about the details. So it was concept development, and then we would use designers. It was writers if we needed writers. I sometimes was use journalists. I was really mixing up how do you get to the end solution? We're making decisions based on how to feed the mouths that we had to feed. And while I was always committed to that, I thought it's the wrong order of things. It's not why I stepped into the blue ocean alone. It's not why I learned to swim. None of that. So I started Tricky, which is my present agency, about 6 years ago. At that time, radiation still existed. I knew that it would be more interesting and more exciting to start a new agency with new people, which was resolutely in the brand strategy, storytelling, and design space. So we literally released ourselves from the responsibility of comms. I could smell as well that comms was quickly becoming an algorithm. Soon it would be putting in keywords, and then, oh, look I didn't even know about AI 5 years ago, but I could tell that soon it would be about putting in keywords and the ad would spit itself out. So I wanted to be well away from that. I wasn't really a true creative director. I didn't dream in colors. I was very interested in the business side of things. I loved my clients. I loved how business worked. I loved being able to help move the needle for them. So
Hmm.
Tricky was much, much closer to the front of that. It's really important to me that we have full access to the culture of the organization we're working with.
Absolutely how I work and why I always felt uncomfortable in ad agencies. It was like
Yeah,
working with a half a deck. Like you don't
yeah,
know how the business runs. And I was never interested in advertising. Never ever.
yeah, yeah,
I just
yeah,
got pulled into advertising. I liked business, how you
yeah.
can coalesce all of the troops around a single idea at the company. I feel like we
Yeah,
get cut off at the knees
absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
advertising model.
It's incredibly arrogant, that whole narrative around an idea can change the world, like, no, an idea can change a sort of a time and a place, but for staff, that idea won't change the world. If they already work for an organization that makes them feel disenfranchised, or they don't particularly want to do a great job because they don't feel like anyone's treating them very well, then there's no idea I can have that's going to inspire them out of that tepid place. It's simply not going to happen. Sometimes you have to say, look, you're not even slightly ready to go to the marketplace because you have a staff, you have a culture that isn't nearly ready to support and embrace what it is you're trying to achieve. So let's start there, and then you'll be able to spend half the money and double the effect, because behind you, you'll have a workforce that really care.
You had a lot of responses to your post. What is your read on women in the creative industries and what their struggles are and what they are battling with, and what would you say to them?
Talk to them about reducing down the narrative of what everybody else thinks, looking at the playing field, if you like, for what it is and what you can get from it. And if you really want to get something from it, then being pretty strategic about how you want to get that. To me, there is a gamifying nature in almost all industries. I didn't just get contacted from that post by people in creative industries. I had a woman who was a CMO in a bank in Australia go, holy fuck, this is happening to me on a daily basis. Give me strength. I had people from engineering, I had people from IT, everybody saying it's every day, it's prevalent. How the hell do I Teflon coat myself? I'm being Buddhist here. The only behavior any of us can change is our response to what's going on at the time. Yep. We can't change the patriarchy. We can't change that guy trying to block my pathway. We can't change those people thinking that about me. The only control we actually have is our response to it. And if our response is primarily negative, and if we primarily think that's not fair, then we're stuck. There is actually no movement. Now, it isn't really fair since the minute we're in the playfield when we're 3. There's still going to be the kid that'll knock you over the head because he wants to play with the toy you've got, you know? Funny how I said he.
Right, yeah.
Could but it could be a girl. We can't actually change the way they did that to you. So let's look at your response to it.
What's the story I
Yeah.
should tell myself? That I had this awesome potential. Everything seemed to fit, and then suddenly I don't have it. Now I could easily go, well, what did I do wrong? Like you said
Yeah.
this before. Or what a dick. Or what's
I,
the third thing?
we'll go into our own whirlpools, and then suddenly we're down the bottom of the whirlpool and we can't even see the light. You might be imagining, okay, here it is, ageism at play again. It may be that someone's done an identical project and they came highly recommended by the chief executive. There are so many pitches I've poured my heart into. I've felt so confident. There's no stone unturned. They seem to light up when we shared everything with them, and we lost. So many pitches I thought we'd win, we lost. So many pitches I desperately wanted that we didn't get. Conversely, there were pitches that I thought, not really sure how that went, that we won. I guess what I've learned when I've picked myself up out of the ashes or the gravel or and I've got gravel rash all over me because the car took off without me and then with other people and they were my client and these were my ideas. When you pick yourself up and the gravel rash heals, I came up with an absolute philosophy that you will get the clients that you deserve and the clients will get the agencies they deserve. So if the clients want to work in a certain way and you're not reflecting that certain way, possibly it's cultural. Possibly the alignment wasn't quite right. To some degree, I've learned to say, okay, universe, that one wasn't for me. And there are reasons I don't know about. You've kind of got to give it up to God to some degree in that way and go, well, it wasn't mine. It really wasn't mine. And it never was. And I kidded myself. I really thought our idea was genius. And then it was cancelled. Or worse, they choose no agency and they decide to do nothing.
Had that happen once with this one company in particular where I interviewed many, many times in New York, and they were going to start a whole new department. I was going to run the department. The same company in their UK headquarters, years later, same thing, different set of people, same department. I was the one they were looking at. Both times they never went for the whole thing that they were playing
Anything.
with this
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Shaped my life though, because I didn't move to London. I
Yeah.
had to come back to New York. I was living
Yeah.
in Barcelona, and we were going to move to London. And then because after all these interviews over many months, where I thought I just need to sign on the dotted line, it changed my life because I went back to New York. I couldn't
Yeah.
go to London really without this job. So these things
Yeah.
do shape your life. These
Massively. Yeah. And the thing is, we can be furious about it and get bitter about it, or we can go, that one wasn't for me. Because that's the only power we really have. What can I learn? And that one wasn't for me. And that gig that you're just talking about that slipped out of your fingers, you have to say that wasn't for me. There was something about
yeah.
that job that wasn't for me. There wasn't an alignment. I thought there was, but there was something I wasn't seeing. And so it wasn't for me. And lick your wounds and pick yourself up and move it forward.
What do you
Because
do the next day?
I kind of have a process where I give myself 48 hours to be fucked off. I'll go out with the dogs and I'll probably have one too many drinks and I rage against the machine. I do give myself that. We're all goddamn human. Give yourself the time to rage against the machine and then go, it wasn't meant to be. There was something wrong with that alignment that I don't know about. Sometimes I will go back to the client and say, let me know what I can do better next time. And sometimes they'll say, nothing, nothing. It honestly was a split here. And then they don't even really tell you. Or sometimes they'll say, look, that fundamentally, you guys didn't really demonstrate A, B, C. And I'll think, okay, interesting. Thank you. And again, if you go in to seek that kind of feedback, you just have to take it, put it on the silver tray. Everything is learning, whether that learning is thickening up my skin or how to bounce forward, not back, or whether that learning is being gracious in defeat, or whether that learning is I shouldn't have even gone for that piece of business. I fucking knew there was something,
Yeah, I've
I
had
had
that.
something recently where I thought, maybe I don't know, they seem really nice. It's not really my bag, but they seem really nice. And in the end, I didn't get it. And I didn't deserve to get it because I didn't really want it. And I think, again, universality of it was that it wasn't meant to be mine, So when they said, oh, look, we're going to move forward with someone else, I was like, oh, thank God, why was I doing this? It's like chasing the wrong dude. Why was I doing
Yeah.
that?
Oh my God. Right.
What I would say,
Yeah.
that the power, you have to hold the power within you. Every time we're furious with someone else about what's happened, we're letting that power go to them. Whereas the power rests with you. You have to, fury is fine, but move through it and then go, it wasn't meant to be for me. What do I learn from it? What space does it now give me to go somewhere else? And really watch the match between your clients, really watch the cultural match, the values match. What do they think? What do they feel? How do they respond? How do they look after their staff? you know, what are their allegiances? Like, find out if they're your people. And then if you do get into some sort of kerfuffle later on down the line, you'll get through it better with them as well, because they are people like you. You're really working with people like you. Hold your power, because you do have that one thing. We have
Yeah.
our own sovereignty. We have agency over ourselves, and that includes the response to disaster. You can either be rolled by life, or you can jump on top of the ball and roll across the top of it. You have full control over whether you want to respond positively, negatively, acidically, furiously. You have that control. So what are you going to take from it?
Yeah. And then own it. Whatever you do, own it.
Yeah, own it. Yeah.
You've been listening to Actual People. This show is written, directed, and executive produced by me, your host, Chauncey Zalkin. Show sound designed by Eric Aaron. Click on the link below to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to leave a review. I'll be sharing my favorites. You can find our socials and all links to deeper dives into these topics at chaunceyzalkin.com and on my Substack at chaunceyzalkin.substack.com. Actual People is available wherever you get your podcasts.